Okay, so in the last one we looked at arrays and we briefly touched on loops when we looped over the numbers in this numbers array here. So in this one we're going to have a look at loops in a bit more depth and look at 3 different types of loops which are commonly used in PHP. So let's go and create a new folder, and this is going to be number 7, loops. Inside of there we'll create a new PHP file and we'll call this loops.php. Opening PHP tag, and then let's just create our first loop. So the first one we'll look at is one that we've already covered. So say for example we have an array with a fixed number of items and we just want to loop over that array and do something with each item in the array. Then the perfect thing for this is a for each loop. So the syntax to use for this is the keyword for each, and then inside of parentheses the first thing that we put here is colors, because that is what we are looping over. We are looping over the colors array as color, and then this will print out the color on its own separate line. So let's cd into number 7 and we'll run php loops.php. And so as you can see we get red, green, blue. Now remember what we said about arrays, and we said that each item in the array has its own index. So here we can say as, and we can call it index or we can call it key. We'll call it key because that is often what you will see. You'll often see, in fact, something like this, key value. Okay, where in this array the key will be the actual index and the value will be the actual value, so red, green, blue. Okay, so here we're going to echo value, but we'll also echo the key, and we'll concatenate that with a space, and then here we should see 0 space red, and then 1 space green, and then 2 space blue. So key being the numerical index for this kind of array. Let's go and print this out. Okay, and so that is exactly what we see. The next type of loop that we'll look at is called a for loop, and you use a for loop when you want to loop a fixed or a specified number of times. And so this is one which took me a little while to get my head around when I first started doing it. For each is nice and easy. I think it's fairly straightforward and you can understand that quite quickly, but the for loop has a strange kind of syntax, and you just need to make sure that you fully understand this before moving on here. So we have 3 parts here separated by semicolons. The first one is the index, i.e. the position that we're in the loop, and so sometimes you'll see them start at 0. Sometimes you might see 1. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at 1. Okay, and then the next thing is a condition. And so this is where you're telling the for loop how many times you want it to loop or to what point you want it to loop. And so here we're going to say keep looping while the index value is less than or equal to 5, and then at the end of each iteration, after each time you've looped through once, then we're going to say increase the index value by 1. So don't think we've looked at this yet, but this little plus plus means increase the value by 1. Okay, so putting that all together, what does that mean? We're going to start at 1, we're going to loop over, because 1 is less than or equal to 5, so that means we can execute another iteration of the loop. So that's what we refer to each pass of the loop as an iteration, and then on completion of the iteration bump the index value by 1, which means the second time round I will be 2. It is still less than or equal to 5, so it means we can continue that iteration, At the end of that, we will increase the index value, which means it will now have a value of 3. And so we'll keep doing that until at some point we will increase it and the index will become 6. And then when we check this condition here, 6 is not less or not equal to 5, and so that means the loop will stop looping. Okay, and so if we loop out here, we're just going to echo loop number followed by the number. We should see that it only goes from 1 to 5. And again, we're putting our line break, our new line, on the end of there. Let's just comment out the for each loop first. So here, what we're hoping to see is numbers 1 to 5 on their own line. So let's go and test that theory. Okay, so loop number 1, loop number 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, how about if we changed this value to 10? What do we expect to see? Well, we expect to see it this time loop up to 10, because we're saying while the index is less than or equal to 10, you can keep going. And so it'll keep going, keep looping, and keep printing out this line all the way up to and including 10. Okay, so like I say, for loops, just be careful with the syntax. It's a semicolon after each of the separating parts here. And one quick thing I'll show you here, how about if we start at 10, so we start with an index value of 10, and we say while I is greater than or equal to 1, so we're going to keep looping, but each time instead of increasing by 1, we're going to go down by 1, so minus minus. So we're going to start at 10, going to loop over, then we're going to decrease by 1, so then we'll be on 9, and it's going to keep going while the index value is still greater than or equal to 1. When the index value becomes less than 1, then guess what? The loop will stop looping. So what do you expect to see here? Why don't you pause me now and run this yourself? This is what we'll see. We will see looping 10 all the way down to 1. So it decreases by 1 each time until this condition is no longer true. So now you're starting to see the stuff that we did on comparisons. You're starting to see an actual practical use of that here by using greater than or equal to. Okay, so the next one that we'll look at is something called a while loop, and this will keep running while a certain condition is true. So here we'll use a similar kind of thing. We'll use numbers, and we're going to say while, we'll say count is less than or equal to 3. So it would start off, this will be true on the first pass, and then we're going to echo out counting count. So the first time here we should see counting 1, because we are starting at 1, and then what we're going to do on each one is we'll just increase that count by 1. So what do you expect to see here? Always stop and think about what you're expecting your code to do and how you're expecting it to behave before you run it, and then when you do run it, you can mentally confirm that it's doing what you expect it to do. So I like to just stop and talk myself through it. So we're starting with a count of 1. While the count is less than or equal to 3, so while it's at 1, it is less than or equal to 3, it should loop over there and it should echo counting count 1 and then a new line. But what we're doing here is inside the loop we're increasing the count by 1, so the second time it loops over, count will have a value of 2. 2 is less than 3, and so we should see this again, and so this time it will say counting 2, and then we're going to increase it again. So the third time round, count will have a value of 3, which is equal to 3. So we should see counting 3. Then we increase the count. Now count will have a value of 4. 4 is not less or not equal to 3. So this time it will exit the loop and it will not print out any further. So let's just go and run this just so we have the visual. So as you can see, we see counting 1, 2, 3 works exactly as we expect it to. One thing I will say about while loops is it's easy to get stuck in an infinite loop if you have some kind of mistake in your code where you're not checking the condition properly, or you're not making some kind of change which means that the loop should eventually be exited. For example, if I didn't have this count here, if we're not incrementing this, what would you expect to happen? Well, actually, it would just keep going forever, wouldn't it? As you can see, it'll just go and go and go because there's nothing which is going to stop it from breaking out of that loop. I'm going to break out of the loop by hitting Control and C, but that's just one thing to make sure of. Make sure that this condition will eventually evaluate to true somehow, otherwise it will just keep going and going and you could run out of memory. Okay, so a nice little section on loops in the book where you get to have a go at things yourself, and it explains them in a little bit more detail and leaves you with a nice little challenge at the end.